So on social media today, I recently saw actual post on in one of my Facebook groups when I saw basically in the year 2022 4 fighters will be nominated to be in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, but unfortunately only 3 fighters can make the cut and 1 fighter needs to be actually left out. So the 4 fighters that are going to be nominated to actually get into that actual Boxing Hall of Fame in the year 2022, obviously it has to be 5 years after they've retired, is obviously Andre Ward, who's recently retired, Floyd Mayweather, who's retired after the actual the Conor McGregor fight, and obviously Klitschko's retired, and Roy Jones Jr. has obviously I'm presuming that he's retired. So okay, so just to put it into perspective, this is purely from a hypothetical perspective. If none of these fighters make a comeback, which isn't inconceivable, because obviously the sport of boxing is a very addictive sport, and fighters within it do usually make ill-advised comebacks. But let's just say hypothetically, if all four of these fighters retired for 5 years, they got nominated to be in the 2022 International Boxing Hall of Fame in Canastota in that year 2022. Okay, so if 4 of these fighters were nominated, 3 of these fighters can make the cut, 1 fighter has to be left out. Which of these 4 fighters, out of these 4 fighters, who is the 1 fighter that will unfortunately have to be left out, who can't actually make the cut and actually make it into that International Boxing Hall of Fame for that particular year in 2022? So obviously this is a very difficult decision to make, because all 4 of these fighters have contributed massively to the sport of boxing, and they've all accomplished so much in their respective divisions. They've 2 of these fighters, obviously Mayweather was a major cash cow in the sport of boxing. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to make a case for each of these fighters. I literally can't make up my mind over who should be left out for that particular year, because obviously they've all accomplished so much in the sport of boxing. But I'm literally just gonna run off my reign and just say why I think certain fighters why I think a fighter should actually make the Hall of Fame, and the reasons why I think they shouldn't make the Hall of Fame. So the fight I'm going to start off with initially is obviously Roy Jones Jr. So now Roy Jones Jr. Obviously he was considered the fighter of the 90s. So he was actually awarded as one of the best. To be one of the best fighters in the 90s. Obviously his actual run in the sport, he did actually look invincible at one point. For a long period of time, he was one of the most athletically gifted fighters that I've ever seen in my entire life. A lot of people say in his prime, there's no fighter in the world that would have beaten him, or he was as physically gifted as Roy Jones Jr. Obviously he had unbelievable speed, power. He had this rare combination where he had speed and power, but he could actually switch it up, and he was incredibly elusive. He had the sort of natural talent that you can't actually teach. It's something that you either have or you don't. And obviously he's accomplished so much. The fighters that he's actually beat in terms of resume, he's beaten obviously he beat a young Bernard Hopkins, he beat a James Toney, he beat Mike McCollum, he's beaten so many fighters. Obviously his resume could have been better, but his contribution to the sport in terms of his time at the top is obviously very it did indent the sport in such a way. In terms of the 90s, he actually owned that particular decade when it came to actually dominating the sport. The only time his first loss to Montel Griffin was via disqualification. So even then, he only lost through disqualification. He didn't actually lose that fight. Obviously, before that, he was actually in the Olympic Games, and the only reason why he lost to his opponent was because he got robbed, and he's considered one of the worst robberies in boxing history. But obviously he's represented his country in the games, and obviously he won a silver medal, although he did deserve the gold medal. Now obviously when he did go up in weight from the middleweight division, the light middleweight division, all the way up to heavyweight, beat John Ruiz and beat him for the title, it was at the time considered an amazing feat. Obviously, we're saying this in hindsight. Obviously, when we look back on hindsight, we would think Roy Jones, looking back on hindsight, you might think Roy Jones had every advantage when it came to that fight. But the fact remains, in terms of before the fight actually happened, it was seen as a massive feat for him to go up to heavyweight and fight a full-blown heavyweight and win a heavyweight title when he started at light middleweight. So the fact that he's accomplished that was massive. Obviously, when he went down in weight, he finally fought Antonio Tarver. It was a hotly spirited contest, their first fight. A lot of people thought that Tarver won, and obviously for some reason when Roy Jones lost all that weight, he was never the same. His reflexes dulled, and from there it just went downhill from there. From their second Tarver fight, Tarver obviously knocked him out, and that was one of the most cataclysmic punches, and it reverberated all around the boxing world. A lot of people just did not see that coming. They did not see Roy Jones ever getting knocked out. He was so dominant for such a long period of time, but unfortunately it happens to the best of them. And obviously from that point on, he had a knockout loss to Glenn Johnson. He obviously did dominate for a long period of time, but his ascension to the sport in terms of getting to the elite top level in the sport was so rapid. For 3 years, obviously, like after the Olympics, he was tracked pretty slow, but after that time period, after he won the middleweight title off Bernard Hopkins, and obviously with everything Bernard Hopkins accomplished afterwards, it made Roy Jones's accomplishments look even better. But after that, it just went downhill from there. He had numerous knockout losses. He's in some ways tarnished his legacy because of the fact that he's carried on for way too long. And obviously he did beat Felix Trinidad, but Felix Trinidad was past his prime. He did beat Jeff Lacey. Jeff Lacey was destroyed after the Calzaghe fight. He fought Calzaghe. Obviously Calzaghe was closer to his prime than Roy Jones was closer to his, and he was a shadow of his former self. And all of his fights after the Glenn Johnson knockout, he may have had one or two good performances against mediocre journeyman, but he never could reclaim that magic that he once had during the 90s, where he was literally dominating fighters, knocking fighters out with his hands behind his head. The amount of crazy stuff that he was doing, he was so fun to watch. He was so exciting. He was electrifying. His actual contribution to the sport, a lot of people thought he was impossible to beat. He was a rare talent. Like, you don't see the type of talent that Roy Jones has that often. I don't think that it's, in terms of physical talent, there's not many fighters that can match him. So the reason why I think he should make the cut is obviously for the International Hall of Fame is has there ever been a fighter that physically and technically gifted, and are we ever likely to see a fighter like that? There was people saying that during his prime that he was the greatest fighter ever. Like, they couldn't see anyone beating him, and obviously he beat a lot of people were saying if he was to fight Sugar Ray Robinson, who was considered the greatest fighter ever, then he would have wiped the floor with him. And in some sense, I could see why they have that perspective, because Sugar Ray Robinson was at his best in the welterweight division. Obviously he won the middleweight title 5 times, but he was at his best when he was in the welterweight division. It must be also said, obviously Roy Jones' quick skills and his silky skills and his defensive ability, it was something. He was a marvel to watch. It was something you knew when you saw it. It's not something that you're going to see ever again. So okay, but the reason why I could see why he doesn't make the cut is because obviously he's carried on for way too long, and obviously there was other great middleweights in his division that he didn't fight. He didn't fight he didn't fight Nigel Benn. He didn't fight Chris Eubank Senior. He didn't fight Julian Jackson. He didn't fight Gerald McKellen. So his resume could have been way better. So they're the two reasons why I believe he shouldn't make the cut. But the main reason why I think he should make the cut is obviously his contribution, his talent, the amount of how fun he was to watch. A lot of people at one time considered him the greatest fighter ever. The fighters that he did beat, obviously he beat Bernard Hopkins and James Toney, but obviously the reasons why I think his resume could have been better, and also the reason why I don't think he makes the cut also is because the reasons I could give why he shouldn't make the cut is because obviously he did carry on way too long and he tarnished his legacy. Now we get on to Andre Ward. Andre Ward obviously has just recently retired. Now this is presuming that he's retired. In my perspective, I think he's retired way too early. He could have easily went on for 5 more years and then retired, fought Adonis Stevenson and such. But obviously with Andre Ward, he's never lost a fight since the age of 12. So since the age of 12 until this point right now, he's never lost one fight. He's won Olympic gold medal Obviously, he competed in Olympic Games just like Roy Jones, and obviously, he was the standout. He was the last, I believe, the last American gold medalist from the Olympics. For the last 50 years or something like that. It was something, obviously his career did start off pretty slow. In 3 years he had 11 pro fights, but after that he joined the Super 6 tournament. He was a dark horse in that tournament. No one expected him to win, no one expected anything off him, but obviously he did beat Arthur Abraham, destroyed him. It made Calzaghe's hard fought victory against Arthur Abraham look ridiculous, because obviously Calzaghe struggled so much with Mikhail Kessler, and then afterwards obviously Andre Ward totally destroyed him and dismantled him in a way that I've never seen anyone do to Mikhail Kessler. After that, obviously he did fight a few other fights like Edison Miranda, and eventually he fought Carl Froch and beat him in decisive fashion and won the Super 6 tournament and a few other titles along the way. And then after that, I think he fought a few other fighters like Chad Dawson. He totally destroyed him. And then obviously with promotional problems, he sat out from the sport for a particularly long time, because he just couldn't find a good promoter. He had legal issues with other promoters. But then when he came back, he obviously had a few fights against Alexander Brand and a few other fighters. Obviously his name escapes me, can't think of his name, but he fought a few other fighters, and then eventually got into the ring. He stepped up to light heavyweight and fought Kovalev, and in them two fights he obviously beat Kovalev. Obviously the first fight was a bit controversial, he hit the deck, but in the second fight it was definitely more decisive victory, and after that he's decided to actually walk away from the sport. Now obviously I think obviously Andre Ward has accomplished a hell of a lot in the sport. Obviously he's won world titles in 2 different weight classes, and he's beaten the best elite fighters at their absolute best when they were at their best. So like he beat Carl Froch when Carl Froch was beating legit competition. He beat Chad Dawson when Chad Dawson was in a higher weight. He went up in weight and destroyed him. After that, Chad Dawson was never the same. He beat Kovalev, who was a monster, who was destroying everyone, knocking everyone out. The way Kovalev dispatched of Bernard Hopkins was so vicious. Obviously he beat him from a technical perspective. He went up in weight against the puncher and just totally outclassed him. So these are things that you can argue that other fighters on this list hasn't done. Like for example, Floyd Mayweather's never went up in weight, fought a puncher in their prime and totally destroyed him. You gotta understand, Kovalev was a top pound for pound fighter at that point, and he totally dismantled him. Carl Froch was considered top 10, top 15 pound for pound. He totally destroyed him. He beat elite opposition for so long. You literally cannot discredit his record. Obviously at this moment in time, before he retired, I had him on my number 1 pound for pound list. But one thing that must be said, obviously with everything that he's accomplished, you could argue the fact that he didn't go on to keep going and fight Adonis Stevenson and unify the light heavyweight division totally, and obviously he could have fought Artur Beterbiev and beat him as well. It could in some way, you can argue, hurt his legacy, but all in all, I think with everything that he's accomplished, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. But it must be said, the fact that he's only retiring at the age of 33, I think he should have went on for 5 more years. So that's one reason I could think of not to give him the top pound for pound status. The other fighters on this list have fully fulfilled their potential in terms of taking their talent as much as they can potentially take it. I can't think of Roy Jones or Klitschko walking away at the age of 33 after beating a monster like Kovalev, but I think Andre Ward may come back if the money's right, so maybe I'm posting this way too soon. So now we get on to another fighter, which is obviously Floyd Mayweather. Now, Floyd Mayweather is a very intriguing person on this list. He's in some sense broke into mainstream consciousness in America, so he's contributed in the sport that, in the sense that he's become a character in the sport. So with obviously Roy Jones and Andre Ward, they never were able to break into the mainstream consciousness. Like they never became crossover mainstream stars. They never became household names. Obviously Floyd Mayweather did after he beat Oscar De La Hoya, but just before that, obviously he has his undefeated record. Obviously Andre Ward has his undefeated record, but Floyd Mayweather's undefeated record is 50-0. Obviously his last fight was against Conor McGregor, which was in my head a farce, but it must be said, he did beat Conor McGregor for one of the richest fights in history. Obviously, his contribution to the sport is in the sense that he fought a lot of great fighters, but obviously most of these fighters were not in their prime. The only fighter that I can think of, which I think is his best victory, is when he beat Diego Corrales. So that was the first fight that Floyd Mayweather was an actual underdog in. He beat Diego Corrales. He knocked him down around 4 or 5 times in the fight, and not only that, he totally destroyed him, totally outclassed him, he totally made him look rudimentary, and he was just a different class to Diego Corrales. He totally destroyed him. It must be said also, like, his victory over Canelo was amazing as well. Obviously Canelo was a little bit green. He was I think he's about 21, 22 years old, and he may have been weight drained for that fight. But it must be said, obviously Mayweather's performance against him was so amazing. The fact that he was the older guy, and he was able to defend so well and counter so well and move around the ring and glide and all the things he was doing to just totally destroy Canelo's confidence and goad the young man and just totally get him out of his element. It was amazing to watch him. Obviously, Canelo at that time had a very similar record to Mayweather in terms of the number of fights that they've had. But obviously, in terms of like the legitimate opposition that they both fought, obviously Mayweather's resume was way better than Canelo's. So in terms of Mayweather's contribution to the sport, I believe he was in the sport of boxing for 22 years, but He was a champion for 21 years. So for 1 year he was not champion. For the rest of the time he was a champion. So it's just crazy to see how much he's contributed to the sport, all the weight classes that he's gone above. One thing must be said. One reason I could think why he isn't to be considered to be let into this actually 2022 Hall of Fame in Canastota is obviously he never fought a top fighter in their prime. He always fought fighters which were weight drained or past their prime. And another thing must be said, he never actually sorry, just someone's just caught. He never actually basically he never actually fought sorry, my mind has just gone because of this phone call. Hold up. Yeah, he never actually fought a fighter when they were actually he never fought the best fight at their weight when he picked up these world titles. So when he went up in weight and fought Arturo Gatti, he didn't fight the man of the division. He fought Arturo Gatti, who was considered a weaker champion of the division. He wasn't like Costa Zoo, who was the top champion of that particular weight class. So he never beat the top guys in their particular weight when they're at their best. So that's one skepticism I can have for not putting him on top in terms of everything that he's accomplished. But he's accomplished a hell of a lot for the sport that he's been in, and obviously many people consider him the face of boxing for that particular time period. Now we get on to obviously Klitschko. So it must be said, all 4 of these fighters were like in the Olympic Games, so they represented their countries in the Olympic Games. So it's amazing how much they have contributed in the sport, not just in a professional sense, but also as great amateurs as well. All 4 of these fights have had great amateur pedigrees in terms of the fighters that they fought, amateur and pro. But it must be said, with Klitschko, obviously he was not an undefeated fighter. He did get chin checked early in his career. He fought 3 fighters and he lost to all of them. And one thing that must be said, obviously with everything that he did accomplish, for 11 years he was undefeated. Now many people may say the level of opposition that he fought during his run as heavyweight champion wasn't as strong as previous eras, for example the 90s, and he couldn't fight the best guy in his weight class apart from himself, because the best guy in his weight class apart from himself was his brother, which is Vitaly Klitschko. And a lot of people do say it was one of the most dullest eras when it came to the heavyweight division. Like, their reign was very monolithic. It was very one-sided, with one fighter just destroying everyone. It wasn't very competitive. There wasn't big names in the division, but with the names that he did have, he actually made the most of it. So he did fight a few bums. It was very similar to Joe Louis's era of boxing, where he did fight a few bums, but most of the fighters that he fought were top fighters, like in that particular era. So he beat David Haye, for example. Many people may scoff at that, saying David Haye didn't really accomplish much at heavyweight, but it's still a name on his resume. Obviously he did beat most Kubrat Pulev. He beat most of the contenders that were in his particular weight class at that time. He can only do what he can with what he has in front of him. So you can't really criticize a fighter for not having the level of elite opposition that was in front of him. You can only do the best you can with what you have. Obviously he did get knocked down and knocked out a few times in his career, but it must be said, with everything that he did accomplish, he the only reason why he will not make the Hall of Fame, and obviously with his loss to Tyson Fury, who dethroned him, and obviously Anthony Joshua, who recently knocked him out and then he retired, he towards the end of his career, he showed the heart that he probably didn't show earlier towards his career. So in terms of his physical talent, there's not many fighters in the heavyweight division that are as physically talented as Klitschko. Even if you look past in history, and it must be said, with everything that he's accomplished, it must be said, he did try his best to fight the top fighters in his weight class, with the talent that he had in front of him. And obviously towards the end of his career, he did go into the ring with Tyson Fury, and obviously Anthony Joshua. And Anthony Joshua seems like he's gonna have a legendary career in front of him, and obviously it's just the start of his career with him just winning the world title off Klitschko. So it's amazing what he's accomplished. 11 years undefeated, everything that he's accomplished. But one thing must be said, he never really wanted to go out of his comfort zone. He never wanted to go fight outside of Germany, and the one time that he did was in Russia. During his monolithic reign when he was champion, he always wanted to fight everyone in Germany. So in some sense, you could say, like, he with the competition that he fought during his reign as heavyweight champion, it was pretty weak. Obviously he did get knocked down a few times, and obviously with him never wanted to leave his comfort zone, and him always wanted to be in control and never wanted to really challenge himself. You can give that as a reason why he should not be inducted. So that's my reasons for who. Obviously, I still can't make up my mind which fight should be left out of the Canastota Hall of Fame in 2022, presuming all 4 of these fighters do stay retired until then. But this is just my thoughts. So, like, I gave reasons for why they should be inducted into it and reasons why they shouldn't. But at this moment in time, I'm kind of leaning for Mayweather to be actually not inducted into the Hall of Fame. And it may sound harsh, but the reason why I'm saying that is because obviously with everything that they did accomplish, all of these fighters, it seems like Mayweather's always taken the route of the highest reward with the lowest amount of risk. So obviously he never fought a fighter when they were at the absolute best in their weight class. Obviously even with Hatton had to go to welterweight. He never fought him at light welterweight when he's at his absolute best. There's many reasons why I would and obviously Andre Ward has always gone up in weight and fought top fighters when they was at their best. Klitschko's tried to make the best of the opposition that he had. You could put Roy Jones in some sense in that same ballpark as Floyd Mayweather, in the sense that he didn't truly challenge himself. He did beat James Toney, Mike McCullum, and obviously Bernard Hopkins, but he never always sought out the best challenge that he had in front of him. So there's reasons for each of them why they shouldn't make the cut, but all in all, I think it's a very difficult decision to make, and whoever misses out, maybe they can get inducted next year. But so yeah, that's my 2 cents on the matter. Who I think should make it and who I think shouldn't make it. I didn't really give a perspective on that. I'm sitting on the fence, but that's my reasons for why I think certain fighters should make it and why they shouldn't make it. So give me your thoughts below. Tell me what you think. Do you think I'm right in my assessment? Do you think I'm wrong? Just comment below, and obviously don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I've got more content coming your way. Thanks for your time. Bye.